Hello friends, I am Dr. Samadhan Mane, Associate Professor of English working at KBP Mahavidyalaya Pandharpur. Today we are going to deal with a topic from your paper Introduction to the Structure and Function of Modern English, that is Discourse Analysis. As you are much aware, the topic is bigger one, so for the sake of convenience I have split the topic in three parts. So in this particular video, we are going to deal with the first point of view through which discourse is analyzed, that is mode of discourse. So as you are aware, discourse is any piece of language that is bigger than a single sentence. The term discourse applies to both spoken and written language used for any literary and non-literary purposes. A number of sentences make passage, and such a passage is called as discourse. You might have studied hierarchy of linguistic units. In that hierarchy, discourse is the highest linguistic unit, which is biggest of all. Discourse is studied from 3 points of view, as I have already told you, that is mode, tenor and domain. So this video is devoted to mode of the discourse. So let us begin with what is mode of the discourse. So language is used in two ways or two mediums. So those mediums are called as modes of discourse. So mode can be defined as a medium in which language is transmitted from the speaker to the listener or from the writer to the reader. In other words, there are two modes of language, that is speech and writing. Speech is called as auditory medium through which language is used, and writing is called as visual medium through which language is used. So mode is related basically to the distinction between speech and writing, because speech and writing differ with respect to linguistic features, and those linguistic features are the differences between speech and writing. So let's move on to the typical features of speech. So to begin with, the first feature of typical speech is inexplicitness. Inexplicitness results from the lack of clarity, because speech is a continuous two-way process where speaker speaks and listener receives from his end. Apart from that, speech includes a number of paralinguistic features including body language, which includes facial expressions and gestures, which are most of the times peculiar to a speaker. So which results in lack of clarity and lack of understanding on the part of the listeners. Moreover, in speech, a speaker uses number of pronouns, and as you are aware, pronouns have a number of references backward and forward, so it becomes obscure most of the times to establish the anaphoric and cataphoric relations between the pronouns and their referents. The second important feature of speech is lack of clear sentence boundaries. It results because speech is spontaneous. In other words, the speaker gets minimum time before he delivers his speech. Therefore, speech might include incomplete sentences as well as phrases instead of complete sentences. So we cannot easily identify where the sentence has begun or where the sentence has come to an end. The third feature of speech is simple structures. So when it comes to simple structures, simple sentences and simple monosyllabic words are used in speech. Moreover, a speaker may use phrasal verbs such as look into or look at. Apart from this, words from the dialects also can be used in speech, as a speaker is spontaneous while he chooses the words. The next important feature of typical speech is repetitiveness. It results due to the speech being ephemeral, as when a speaker speaks, the words get vanished into the air. So for the sake of understanding and for the sake of memory, most of the important words and expressions are repeated by the speaker. Sometimes in order to seek for confirmation also, a speaker repeats certain words. The next feature of typical speech is normal non-fluency. Here also non-fluency results from naturalness of the speech. Speech is natural, most of the times unprepared and spontaneous also. So therefore a speaker uses gap fillers such as etc. in order to fill the gaps that is created between the words. So right now also the present speaker is using certain gap fillers as it's an example of a speech. Then non-fluency also results because of unfinished sentences and grammatical blends also. So grammatical blends are mixture of the two different patterns, which is a typical feature of speech. Otherwise in writing we don't use grammatical blends. The next feature of typical speech is monitoring and interaction features. So these monitoring and interaction features are used by the speakers because the speaker wants to attract the attention of the listeners. Therefore, features such as short responses, action responses also most of the times if the speakers are present face to face, and expressions like okay, well, you know, I mean, never mind, no, and most of the times speaker uses the feature of asking questions also in order to check whether the listeners are attentive or not. The last feature of typical speech is features reflecting informality. So speech is relatively informal, therefore most of the times grammatical rules are not carefully followed by the speakers. Apart from this, informal expressions and intimate terms of address also are used in speech. For example, intimate terms that are used by the friends to address each other are used in speech. Now let's move on to the features of typical writing. The first feature of typical writing is explicitness, which simply means clarity. So everything is made clear by the writer as he gets more time before he writes, and most of the writing is self-explanatory, which results in clarity. Due to the more time which a writer gets before he delivers his content, the writing becomes well organized and he has a choice to use compact language. The second feature of typical writing is clear sentence boundaries. So writing has a clear sentence boundaries simply means that conventions of writing are followed in typical writing. For example, each sentence begins with a capital letter and ends with a full stop. So a reader can easily identify where a sentence starts and where does it come to an end. Important points can be underlined or italicized by a writer and writing becomes well organized. The third feature of writing is more complex structures. So polysyllabic words and complex words which a writer chooses result in complex structure of writing. Most of the times writers use technical words also, which results in obscurity. The next feature of writing is non-repetitiveness, as there is no need to repeat any word because written words are permanent. So writer does not repeat any single word or expressions. Next feature is fluency. Writer has sufficient time before he writes, therefore writing becomes fluent and well organized. Next feature of writing is no monitoring and interaction features, because while a writer writes something, reader is not present, therefore writing lacks these monitoring and interaction features. There is no any kind of dialogue there in writing. The last feature of typical writing is features reflecting formality. So writing is relatively more formal than speech. Therefore, rules of grammar are carefully followed while writing, and most of the times formal expressions and formal terms of address such as sir, madam are used while writing. Now, at the end of this video, let us see whether we have understood the characteristics of speech and writing. These types of questions you might face in your examination. The question is, identify the mode of the given discourse and state at least 2 characteristics with examples taken from the passage that has been given. So one passage is given. Now read the passage and see whether you have got how to analyze discourse from the point of view of mode. Thank you very much.